Library. Thank you so much for joining the Darien Library this evening. We have four terrific thriller authors. And before we begin to tell you a little bit about them, I'd like to thank the Darien Friends of the Library who make these programs possible. I'd also like to thank our partner bookstore, Barrett Books in Darien, Connecticut, where you will find these titles on their shelves. Please type your questions into the Q&A box and we will address them as the program goes along. And without further ado, let me tell you a little bit about the authors. Debbie Babbitt has worked as a copy director for 2 Manhattan publishing companies. Let me see your book, great cover. In addition, she has also worked as an actress, playwright, and drama critic. Her feature articles have appeared in Crime Reads, Suspense Magazine, and Mystery and Suspense Magazine. Debbie is a member of the International Thriller Writers and Sisters in Crime organization. She is the author of Saving Grace, her debut novel that was named one of the most anticipated thrillers of 2021. First Victim is Debbie's second novel, which will be out in June of 2022. Lynn Constantine is a well-known author who writes with her sister under the pen name Lynn Constantine. Together they have published internationally best-selling novels such as The Last Mrs. Parrish, as well as The Last Time I Saw You, The Wife Stalker, and The Stranger in the Mirror. Their critically acclaimed books have been praised by USA Today, The Sunday Times, People Magazine, and Good Morning America, among many others. And their books have been translated into 28 languages and are in development for both television and film. Wendy Walker is a long-term friend of the Darien Library. She is also a best-selling author of psychological suspense. Her books have been published in over 23 languages and have been optioned for film and television. Prior to writing, she worked as a family lawyer and an investment banker. She holds degrees from Brown and Georgetown University and has lived in Fairfield County for most of her life. In addition to her latest thriller, Don't Look for Me, Wendy just released an Audible original novel, American Girl. And last but not least, our talented moderator this evening, Phillippi Ryan, is the best-selling novel of 13 novels of suspense. She has won multiple prestigious awards for her crime fiction, including 5 Agathas, 4 Anthonys, and the coveted Mary Higgins Clark Award. In addition to writing, she is an award-winning on-air investigative reporter for Boston's WHD-TV and is the recipient of 37 Emmys, 14 Edward R. Murrow Awards, and dozens of other honors for her groundbreaking journalism. Hank's novels have been named Best Thrillers of the Year by Library Journal, New York Post, BookBub, Pop Sugar, Real Simple, and others. You are in store for a talented panel tonight, and sit back, relax, and type in your questions. Hello, ladies, and hi, Hank. Take it away.
Thank you.
Hi, Kathleen. Hi, everyone. So nice to see you all. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Where are you all? Debbie, you're in Florida? What's it like?
Yes. Well, it's a little cool here and rainy, but I can't complain because it's 70. And I know it's very cold in the Northeast, so it's fine here.
And Lynn, you're at home?
I'm in Connecticut, where it is much colder than 70, about 22, something like that. But the sun has been out, so that's been nice.
Yeah. And Wendy, how about you?
I am hiding in my bedroom in Connecticut because my children are all home from college. I still have one in high school, and they have taken over the house. So I have my makeshift office up in my bedroom. Yes, it's very cold. I didn't even go outside today. So
I'm in Boston, where it's like 8, I think. I see Julie is here from Boston. She will attest to how cold it is, but it is beautiful. It is beautiful. And it's wonderful to see you all here tonight. Debbie, thank you for bringing us all together. So I want you to know that if I look over here, I'm looking at your chat questions, and we'll be monitoring the chat, and we'll be monitoring the Q&A. So if you have a question for any of these authors, please let us know, and we will definitely ask them and weave them into our chat. If you want to just say something in the chat, I will look at that as well when I look over here. I'm checking on that. So let's start tonight with a quiz. Okay, we'll start with the quiz based on my investigative reporting. I want to tell all of you something that you might not know about each of our authors this evening, and then you guess which one it is, and then we'll talk about that. So the first one of our authors tonight was once, and this is a tough one, was once a model. Which of our authors was once a model? Can you guess? Anybody in the chat want to guess? I can give you you're not guessing. Okay, you all are so shy.
Shy people.
Debbie says, Michael says Debbie. Lucy says Debbie. Okay, this is good. There seems to, Susan says all of you. Ooh, a trick question. All of you.
I like that one.
So I certainly have never been a model. Anyway, yes, you are right. The answer is Debbie Babbitt, who was a model and an agent and an actor and a critic. Talk a little bit about that. How did that all, inform your novel writing?
Well, it was interesting. I started as an actress, and everything is character for me. And as the great Stanislavski said, character is action. So that has informed my writing and my playwriting. I was also a playwright, and I love writing dialogue. But the thing about novel writing is I have a much broader canvas. I have the thoughts, I have the emotions. A first person narrative is like a 400-page monologue. So that has informed, the acting really informed my writing. Also being a drama critic did, because I got to go to see all the plays, and that would have been a really interesting career as well. But I just feel that there's something about a novel. I'd always been an ardent reader, and I actually wrote a 200-page book when I was 8. My brother reminded me about that. So I guess I've always loved books, thought about books. And while I love plays and always will, the idea of you creating the characters and orchestrating everything is so much more exciting than just playing one character.
Well, it's interesting because I wonder what you all think about this. Sometimes when I'm writing, it feels like I'm doing method acting. I'm becoming the character. I have the posture of the person and the expression of the person and the motivation of the person. Wendy, I see you nodding. Do you feel that ever?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I start every book and every character with a piece of myself and a piece of something I'm familiar with. And then as it evolves and you start working the plot in and the designs that you have for the character starts to take on the personality that you intended and starts to grow and change and really develop. And I always have to go back to the beginning when I'm revising and conform a little bit to where the character ended up, just some thoughts or just characteristics or even tone of voice. Because the characters they take on a life of their own. Absolutely. And they evolve and develop as you dive into them and write in there, especially in first person. So and then they just become something, completely new that partly you expected, but a lot you didn't. And that is kind of magical.
I mean, I've heard that word magic. Sue Grafton used to call it magic all the time. I was at an interview where I listened to this Lee Child and Stephen King were interviewing each other. And they each said that when they were in the flow, it actually felt as if they were taking dictation from the character, that they were not even writing, but that they were just being the character so much. Lynn, do you feel that? Do your characters talk to you? Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, and some more than others. I mean, it's always difficult. There have been a few experiences with books where that hasn't happened right away, and those are the tougher novels, the ones that it flows. I was just today, my sister and I are in the midst of completing the next book, and I was writing a very tense scene where the protagonist is in danger, and my heart was beating really. I said to her, oh my gosh, I'm writing this scene and I'm typing it really fast and it's all coming to me and I'm getting super nervous about what's going to happen to her. And so I felt what you're saying in terms of that method, acting method writing. And yeah, in certain characters, they really do, I'll go in with one idea and I'll start to write and they'll just take it somewhere else. And I've learned to go with that and just let it happen. And then, if there's something that has to get fixed in a different place, as you said, Wendy, you go back and you fix it or you change it.
And it's so interesting. One of my books I was writing, I had this scene that I had figured out so beautifully where my character, who is a reporter, was going to shoot someone. And I had set it up and she was a prodigy with a gun and there was reasonable that she had it, all this kind of stuff. And at the moment I'm writing the scene as fast as I possibly can. And as you're saying, Lynn, it was all exciting. And then at some point she just stopped. I mean, I see her just like this saying, I'm not going to shoot somebody. And I'm like, yes, you are, because you have to for this book to work. And she said, I'm a reporter. I think for a living. I don't shoot people. And I thought, okay. And I had her, and she said that. That's what she says. That's what she says in the book. Debbie, do your characters tell you things?
Oh, they talk to me all the time. In fact, my husband, Ted, says they're always sitting on the computer waiting for me every morning. And one of my favorite plays is Pirandello's 6 Characters in Search of an Author. Always talking to me, changing things, arguing with me. And the other thing I wanted to bring up that I think is so important that I learned in acting, that's so important for writing, is to be in the moment. And readers always know when you are in the moment with your character. And it's not that you're in the past, because we all know in thrillers, everyone has a past, but you're in that moment, moving along with the character. And I think that when we choose our words and sentences to propel that action, to propel that character, the reader always knows. They know they're following you. So you have to have that vision of what you foresee, and the characters just tell us. I always start with a voice. Mary Grace just started talking to me, this 11-year-old orphan from the South.
Let me stop you for a second because I want to get to your book.
Oh my God.
And I want to hear exactly how that happened. But let's do 2 more fun facts and then we'll get to your specific book, because I want people to meet Mary Grace, and that is fantastic. Okay, second quiz question for you. One of our panelists, and it could be me, just so it doesn't narrow it down so quickly, one of our panelists is called Lemons by her friend. Which of our panelists is called Lemons by her friends? We're going to give you 10 seconds to guess, you all. Who's called Lemons? Who's called Lemons? Tick, 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 tick. You guys, you're not going to guess. Okay, Wendy Walker says Michael. Michael's great. He is really into this, and I'm very appreciative.
Oh, Michael.
Lucy says Lynn. Okay. Lynn. Okay, Joanne says Lynn. Joanne, you are right. It is Lynn. Lynn Constantine, why were you called Lemons? And still to this day?
Because my name in Greek is Lemonia, which means lemon tree, even though and so when I went my undergraduate, I went to a Greek college. And so of course, all my friends, my Greek friends would just shorten it to Lemons instead of Lemonia. And I mean, even though no one ever called me that, I was always Lynn, but that was just my Greek name after my grandmother. And so my friends from college, who I'm still close with, that's how they refer to me, as Lemons.
It's great, and I love the idea. Not only that I now will always think of you as Lemons, but how your friends created this persona for you, and how you have this circle of friends who you know from college, and you recognize that they're the ones who call you that. And I know that relationships are so important to you and your sister. Yes. I mean, you write together, and family and friends are so important in your novels. The other characters who are in your books. How do you think about the other characters who people your books, not just the main character, and how they affect them?
We really love all of our characters. There's really, except for the bad ones, but even those characters we love writing. And I don't think they'd be in the book if we feel like if they weren't important. And again, I think we've expanded a bit more. So in our earlier work, it's usually was 2 women. And now, like The Stranger in the Mirror has, I think, four 4 perspectives. Yes, 4 different perspectives. And the one we're working on now as well. And we've brought in older women in both of those books. So in The Stranger in the Mirror, there's a mother-in-law. And in the one we're working in now, there's a woman, actually my favorite character, and she's in her 80s. And we were working with our editor, and she wanted us to cut her point of view to give more agency to our protagonist, which we did give more agency to our protagonist, but in a different way. But we couldn't cut her. We said, you know, so I like, no, I love her, and my sister loves her, and our beta readers love her. And so how do we make it work and keep her? And that's, you know, that was the question that we, instead of just saying no. So yeah, I get very attached to all of them, and they definitely feel to me like real people. I'll dream about them, you know, we'll talk about them, I'll think about them later, books later. Yeah.
I love that. I think it's so marvelous. Debbie, it's like an ensemble cast though.
Yes.
That works together in a play, that if one, you know, remember in a chorus line when they want people who are working together, not the one person who stands out. Talk a little bit about the ensemble cast in your book and how you balance that.
Well, it's interesting because I'm playing all the characters, of course. I feel like I'm all the characters, in spite of the fact that more time is spent with Mary Grace, the main character. But I have a town full of characters. This is more characters than I ever envisioned. And they all sort of just came to life for me. And yes, it is kind of like an ensemble cast. I remember when I was acting, I would write pages and pages of biography on my character. Mm. And it got to the point where I didn't really want to get up and perform by then. So I realized I should be writing. But it's so exciting to have this whole cast of characters, and they all play a very important role, and how my main character reacts and interacts with them, and how some of them don't interact with the main character, but they have lives of their own. And I try to write a biography for everybody in the book. So I know it's big cast in this book, I know, but I do try to do that. I need to know everything. And I remember you need to have a background for everyone. I remember in acting class, someone walked onto a stage and the director said, "Where are you coming from? You can't just walk into a room. You have to be coming from somewhere. You have to bring that with you." So I try to do that with all the characters, and it takes a lot of time.
That is a good note. I'm gonna think about that. Wendy, do you think about the ensemble cast and how the puzzle pieces in your stories have to fit together?
Absolutely. Well, I'm a plotter, so I plot everything out, chapter by chapter. And what I love about the supporting cast is that you can make them as evil as you want, and you won't get any pushback from anybody because they're not the main character. So no one has to like them. No one has to like what they do or what they say. And they can be so damaged, so conflicted. They can be evil. They can just be good and evil. They can be, you know, hypocritical. They can be anything you want them to be, because you're not worried about readers attaching to them. And, you know, a lot of times you get that feedback about a primary character. I don't know if all of you have the same experience where, you know, readers really don't want necessarily to have all of the characters in the book be unlikable or
let's talk about that, because this is exactly what I've been thinking about when you were talking. So let me ask you about it first, Wendy. Yeah. When people say, I need to like someone, I need to relate to someone, we write thrillers, and people are complex in thrillers. You know, if in another genre they might not be so complex, but everybody wants something, and they'll go pretty far to get it. How do you handle that balance in your books?
So I think, you know, I personally love flawed characters, and I will take a dark flawed character, and I love that, but not everybody does. So look, we are commercial writers as well. So we are trying to appeal to readers on both ends of the spectrum, people who can take a really flawed, terrible character, and people who want someone that they, you know, can attach to. And so I understand that note when it comes back, you know, like you can't destroy this character, or you know, this character needs to be a little more understandable. And I get that. I do. Personally, I'm okay. As I said, I'm okay with really flawed, damaged characters. But I have found a great balance in writing primary characters who are at least understandable, so that most readers will empathize and root for that character. Because at the end of the day, with a thriller, you can have as much action as you want and as much intrigue as you want. But if the reader doesn't care about the characters, when they put the book down and start forgetting about the action, emotionally, they're not attached and they may not pick the book back up. What makes a reader come back to a book is that emotional attachment that stays in their mind, and they need to know what happens because part of them is identifying with the character.
Sure.
So part of them wants to know the character is going to be okay because part of them is worried. It's like a psychological attachment that's much deeper than just an intellectual one.
That is fascinating. Does that speak to you, Lynn? Do you think about that balance? I mean, you have some characters who really have some interesting motivations, and I know that we all worry about people doing something that for a reason. It has to have a reason that we come to understand. And that's so prevalent in your books.
It does. I mean, probably the best example is The Last Mrs. Parrish, because that book starts off with Amber Patterson, the whole first half of the book, and she is not a likable. I mean, she's actually quite despicable. But you have a front row seat to the way her mind works, which is fascinating, and in her motivations and her work ethic, which is very strong. So she has one or two good qualities. The rest are not. And the fear was as well that there could be people that would start the book and be so turned off by her that they would put it down. And I'm sure that did happen on some, because there are a lot of reviews that would say, I'm really glad I stuck with it. I was really furious and I didn't know if I could, because of course you get into Daphne's perspective, who is the person that you do root for, and things change. So it's a tricky thing. And I think but I don't think they have to be likable. Same with Gone Girl, but I think they have to be intriguing, and there has to be some stake that the reader is involved in, and that the reader is looking for an outcome from. So, even if it's not necessarily this character that they're reading about, maybe they don't want the character to succeed, and that's their stake in the book because they're looking at the good, the good character over here.
Well, most people certainly did love the beginning of The Last Mrs. Parrish. That's a madly successful novel, and I was riveted. I mean, she's just deliciously, irresistibly awful.
Right.
And that's really fun. Debbie, do you gauge that too? Do you balance that as well? Someone who you may not love, but you sure are interested in them?
Absolutely. I mean, a lot of times villains are what interest people the most. And, really rooting for someone, that's very important, of course, in thrillers, but no one ever forgets the villain. No one ever forgets Iago. And, you want to know what the character's going to do. You want to know how they're going to affect the protagonist. And yes, you can go, I was going to say that evil, the whole thing about thrillers is that everyone expects that evil will be vanquished.
Right.
And that does happen in most thrillers. And so we're very invested in the characters, but we're also invested in the villains because we want to see how they interact with the protagonist and what exactly they're doing that's affecting the protagonist. And of course, as writers and performers, part of us is in every character. So of course, I always remember, you remember the play Amadeus? Well, in the very first monologue, Salieri's talking about him. And all of a sudden, you don't realize he's the villain of the piece until halfway through. And he says, and then, how I killed Mozart. And you say, what did he just say? And I think that's like so interesting in characters who are secretive or hidden, or they show a different face and you may not even know who they are immediately, or that they're someone evil. They might be someone who's good. So I find that balance fascinating. And I've always thought it would be interesting to write a book from the point of view of the villain, I will say, and see how far it takes one and what the reader comes away.
Well, it's interesting because, I think that would be an interesting exercise, maybe hard to do because you do need to get and we could talk about this at some point, but we do need to get the reader to care about what happens, if not root for them, at least care. And sometimes And I wonder, Wendy and Lynn, if you agree with this, that one of the reasons that the villain character comes to life is how the main character reacts to them.
Yes.
You know, when the villain is an obstacle, and the character has to make a decision about what to do about the obstacle that the villain raises, and the decision that the character makes reveals their personality and their motivation. Do you all look at it that way?
Yeah, I mean, I think that villains are what makes villains fascinating and ultimately somewhat likable, or at least understandable, is when we can understand how they got to where they are, or we're curious about it, or as Lynn was saying, the fascination with how their minds work. Because we do have, I think, an innate fascination with evil because it's a threat. It's a threat to our, our human existence. And so we're fascinated with the harm they can do. And I think we also relate back to what's in our own minds and not necessarily what we're capable of, but we all have dark thoughts. We all have, thoughts that we shoo away, and right. Human nature that bubbles up sometimes that, we as they say, we start getting socialized in kindergarten. So I think there's a fascination with good versus evil and the balance. And so I think most books where you have, villains that are, that we attach to, there is that internal struggle with how they're interacting with the other characters and wondering, what's going to win out. But ultimately a fascination with the complexities of the human mind.
And that's what thrillers are all about. How we behave and what our motivations are and what we want and how far we'll go to get it. And will good prevail in some way at the end? I want to keep going about the quiz because we have one more quiz question. And I know you all are so thrilled to answer the quiz question. So this could be me or it could be Wendy. Now you've watched this. This could be me or it could be Wendy. One of us trained to be a competitive figure skater as a little girl. Which of us do you think that is? Oh, you're not guessing because you all are laughing at the idea of the possibility that I could be a figure skater. Not a chance, not a chance, not a chance. Michael guessed Hank. That is so wrong. That is
wrong. Wendy, blushing.
Wendy, I wish I had seen you skate. Do you still skate? That's astonishing.
I don't actually. I don't know why. It's not accessible. I mean, you have to, it takes a lot of effort to get to an ice rink. And also when I skate now, I can't do the things that I used to do. So, I mean, because my body just doesn't have I have the muscle memory. And it's funny that if I try to go out and do something I used to be able to do, in my mind, I'm doing it. But, in my mind, I'm also, a foot in the air instead of 2 inches.
Exactly. The thing about ice skating is that it is difficult and it takes some determination and practice and time, and you can't be instantly good. You have to devote yourself to it. And that is so similar to writing, isn't it?
It is. And that experience taught me many things. And first of all, not succeeding in that dream that I, pursued for many years, 6 hours a day, getting up at 4:30 in the morning when I was, 14 years old, and going to a freezing cold ice rink and giving up most of my high school existence really to train. And then to not have that dream come true. Lots of lessons in perseverance, but also in trying to balance, your expectations with with reality. And so it's been a really interesting journey being a writer because unlike my other endeavors after skating, there's no clear path to success. And you're never, ever there. I mean, some people are. James Patterson is there. And, some people are there, and they'll never not be there. But for most of us, we go book to book and we make some headway and we have success. And then, okay, what do you got next? They want to know what the next book is. So, it's really interesting because I'm always asking myself, okay, where are we? Is this going to happen? Should we stay in this? Because I do have that experience from when I was younger, of understanding that you can put hard work into something and you can want it with all your heart and it cannot come true.
And you can still have a dream, and you can still
still
have a dream of it. We've all persisted with this in our careers. We've all taken step by step. Let me go to where we did persist too, because I want to talk about your individual books as you all are so fabulous. We're just almost out of time, but we're going to keep going a little bit. Let me read to you all, because again, on the quizzes, I'm going to read you a first line, and you all guess which first line it is, and then we'll talk a little bit about the book. How about this as a first line? I like to think I'm a good person, but I have no way of knowing for sure. I like to think I'm a good person, but I have no way of knowing for sure. Which book do you think that is? Okay, I'm quickly just going to tell you. This is The Stranger in the Mirror by Lynn Constantine. I know you're all grown up now and you don't want to take a quiz. The Stranger in the Mirror by Lynn Constantine, which that is the perfect first line for this marvelous book. Tell us why it's such a perfect first line, Lynn.
Because Addison, who's saying that, does not have any memory of her entire life except for the past 2 years. So the book opens up and she is engaged to someone who she's known for 6 months, who has a whole history and a family. And she doesn't know anything about herself other than what she's made in the past. So she wants to be happy and she wants to move on, but she doesn't know what she's left behind. And she doesn't know if she's done anything bad, because she does have a few flashes of memory and they're all very violent scenes. So she doesn't know if something bad was done to her or by her. And that's where the book takes off and goes, forward.
I mean, it's interesting because when you write a book about someone who doesn't know who they are, you have the problem as an author of that they have no backstory to remember.
Exactly.
And they're just described by someone else. And also the idea of she's about to have a really good life now, but she wants to know the truth. And the question of, is it better to know or is it better to not know? So talk a little bit about that in The Stranger.
Sure. So, you make a great point about, in terms of character, of not, we of course know her backstory, but she doesn't. So it can't be reflected on the page initially. So what we did instead is we wanted to try to capture what her emotional feelings would be, not knowing. What would it be like to not have any idea where you came from, who, if you had a family, if you'd left anyone behind. And we really tried to tap into that, that feeling of sort of being floating out there, with nothing to anchor her. And we also did a lot of research on amnesia and on trauma. So she has a traumatic past that we knew about. So we were able to bring her trauma in, even though she has no conscious memory of her life. Trauma has its own memory, that even when your mind, the body remembers trauma. It's really embedded in our genes as well. So a certain scent or sight will trigger a response in her, and she doesn't really understand why, but this happened. So all of those elements helped to make her more three-dimensional from the beginning. And then as we're discovering along with her, really, what has happened to her, what's going on. And she has, we also had to try to make her react to situations in a certain way. So, you're an innately good person. If you see, I don't know, say you see a dog running down the street, maybe you go and grab that dog if you don't know it. Or if you see a squirrel run in front of your car, are you the kind of person who stops or are you accelerating, right? These are different things
those are the things that define her in the now.
Exactly.
So, but who she was is gone, which is, you did a wonderful job with Stranger in the Mirror. So evocative and so interesting and so many clues throughout. We love finding out who she is along with her. It is marvelous. So if you all haven't read this, you know where you can find it at the bookstore. You can find it at the library. We are delighted to be here with Barrett Bookstore tonight. Let me give you a couple more lines. One is, how about this for a first line? I was coming up on the anniversary of my parents' death when the girls began disappearing. I was coming up on the anniversary of my parents' death when the girls began disappearing. Look at those comments pouring in. You all are guessing like mad. That is,
Saving
of
Grace.
course, that is the marvelous first line of Saving Grace by Debbie Babbitt. That is such a terrific first line because it gives us forward motion and it gives us instant backstory and we're instantly interested. Talk a little bit about this book and why that, oops, I could put it right side up. And talk about this book and why that line is such a perfect first line for this book.
Well, it's interesting. I said I work from voice and character, and this 11-year-old orphan in the South started talking to me, and that was actually the first sentence she ever spoke to me. So I had to then think. That's how I knew she was an orphan. I didn't know quite where she lived in the South, but as she went on talking, I knew she lived in the South, and she's full of guilt because, as a kid with her parents, things that happened and whatever that made her feel so guilty. But the main thing is that the book goes back and forth in time. So we see Mary Grace as an 11-year-old orphan, and then we see her as the sheriff of her town when another girl will go missing. So this is really resonant because this has stayed with Mary Grace for 24 years. She talks about it. She misses her parents dreadfully. She's being bullied in school. Her one saving grace is that she's a great softball player. And then when a new girl moves to town, she becomes her first and only best friend. So Mary Grace is thinking her life is looking up. And then the girls start disappearing. So this is something that has stayed with her for 24 years. When she becomes sheriff as an adult, she's also a single mom with a 6th grade daughter herself. And the theme of her parents, losing her parents, being orphaned, being alone, there are other characters who also go through this. So this also resonates with Mary Grace. And even though you don't meet her parents in the book, she's always talking about what her daddy said to her and what he says to her about the pastor in church. And the pastor's always talking about evil, and her daddy has his own views about evil. So she misses her daddy dreadfully, but you also know she's filled with guilt.
Well, the evil just is immersed in this book. It is woven throughout. The sense of foreboding is from the very beginning. And part of it is how she reacts to this. Yeah. That she, instead of going small, she decides to try to make people safe. And even that is a different, I don't want to give anything away.
I know, but I wanted to also say that in the prologue, the other thing that's so interesting to me about evil, whether evil inside us and evil around us, is Mary Grace questions herself after that sentence, and she has a few more pages. She says, did evil choose me, or did I choose evil? So evil is such a theme, and it's in the Baptist church. The pastor's always talking about how we're born in sin. So evil takes many forms in the book, because there's also a white supremacist cult going through the South, and they're getting closer and closer to repentance. And they have their own, as her Uncle Samuel says, they're not selling salvation, even though they call themselves the Salvationists. So you have evil everywhere, within, without. And it's probably more of a theme than anything I've ever written. It really fit with the story and her guilt and evil.
It's truly immersive, and your title is perfect. Did you know the title from moment one?
Immediately. And her name was Grace. Originally her name was Grace. And then I changed it to Mary Grace because I like the rhythms, and rhythms are really important to me in sentences. And then it was Grace Mary, but I thought Mary Grace was just a perfect.
It works perfectly. Very evocative and very multi-layered. All right, so this is going to be easy, but let me tell you the first line of another book, which is, the sky grows dark as I drive. The sky grows dark as I drive. And of course, that is the beginning of Don't Look for Me by Wendy Walker. My copy of this book is somewhere in this house. and I will tell you that at the beginning of the pandemic, I said to my husband, okay, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to use my time wisely, and I'm going to alphabetize our books.
Oh, wow.
And I did not do that. I didn't even come close.
Would never occur to me to do that.
Because you're a smart woman.
No, because I'm not organized, but yeah.
But anyway, so somewhere in my house is this, and it would have been under the W's had I but organized. Talk about why I love this first line, because it's instant action and instant forward motion. Talk a little bit about why you chose it and why it's so perfect for this book.
So Don't Look for Me is about Molly Clark, who's a wife and mother, and she disappears in this small, economically challenged town, and there are a lot of compromised characters there. And then her daughter, who comes back to search for her, and everyone else has given up. They assume that she's walked away from her life because they found some evidence to that effect. But her daughter gets a new clue and comes back. So we have these two narrations. They're alternating time frames, but they both take place in this small town where there is a great deal of danger. And for both Nicole, the daughter, and for Molly, the mother, who has been abducted. And the first chapter, it's not a spoiler to say she's abducted. It's on the jacket, so that's I can safely say that. But the first chapter was so important to set up the tone of the book and the peril that Molly is in and is going to be in. And I had to accomplish that in 10 to 12 pages. And so I just wanted the reader to immediately be with her. I wanted them to be in the car with her. It's written in present tense, first person. And that's all that I wanted to accomplish, was for the reader to just be with her in the moment where she gets into this truck with this man and his little girl. And
creepy little girl.
Yeah. So I was like, well, that's what she was doing. She's driving and the sky's growing dark because there's a storm coming, and all of those things play into why she ends up on this back road in this town without a car and needing to take this ride from a man who has a child with him. And so that's the whole first chapter, is all about being with her and feeling that you are in that car with her and in that peril with her.
And it's so tense and so foreboding. Mm-hmm. But then there are people who think maybe she wasn't abducted, that maybe she wanted to go. And the idea that maybe you could leave your life behind. And what would you do could you possibly do that? And could that ever work? And how the past affects us. Talk a little bit about that theme.
Yeah, so that was the initial premise of the book, and it came from a moment that I actually had where I just was having a little freak out. I wasn't thinking about leaving my life, but I had, one of those moments where we've all had them in various points where, like if your cell phone's not working and you want to just throw it at the wall, you get so frustrated. And it's called emotional hijacking, where the emotional part of your brain actually takes over the rational decision-making part. And I found that so fascinating. And when I did research, I discovered that most missing person cases are resolved in a way where the person has left voluntarily and comes back voluntarily, sometimes because of abuse or neglect or more rational reasons for survival, but sometimes because of these emotional breaks where the pain of life is unbearable and the emotional brain takes over. And so that's where we find Molly. Many things in her life have been devastating. I gave her a really terrible backstory, and she finds herself overwhelmed when that storm hits and she runs out of gas, and it's like the last straw. And so she has this moment of just walking down this road sort of in a daze, where her emotional brain is just, needs to get her out of that situation because it's too painful to stay in her life.
I mean, in all of your books, and you all can hear from the descriptions of these novels, of these thrillers, that they are all such page turners. We, as readers, I couldn't wait to turn the page, and I just kept thinking, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? Beautiful writing in all of them, and fabulous setting in all of them, and fabulous storytelling in all of them, and fabulous characters in all of them. And we do have a question about that. We have a couple of questions that let me ask. It says, when writing a thriller, in what order do you focus on the plot, character, or fear factor? And that's what we're talking about, that all those have to be in. I know, Debbie, you said you thought about character first.
Yes, always character. And then the character starts taking me on a journey and revealing more and more of her story. And because you're writing in the genre of thrillers, and it's not a literary book about character where it can take place over, let's say, 24 hours, you've then got to craft the story to fit the character. However, you want the story to grow organically out of the character. So whatever happens, you're in the moment with them, of course, and what we call the twists and the reversals, they grow out of the character on her journey, and things start to happen. So I would say my order would be character, and then I start to shape the plot. And then the fear factor is more the emotions that are all just coming out because of what's going on that we can all relate to. And I think that's what readers relate to. They may not know the story, they may not be in that kind of world, but fear, doubt, love, hate, rage, everyone can relate to that.
Desire and envy and revenge. Yes. I mean, I have to tell you that I think of plot first. I think here's the thing that could happen. Who would that happen to? How about you, Lynn? What order do you think of it in?
Same. I mean, we come up with the twist first. So we try to say, okay, what can we take? What situation can we take and turn it on its head? And then from that, we develop the characters. And so similar to what you're saying, Debbie, we may have an idea of what a character is going to do, but as the character becomes more developed, that will change. And we will never conform the character to fit the plot. So the plot will change. And the twist essentially isn't, but we often don't know how it's going to end. We'll say to each other, because I write with Valerie, what's going to happen to her? And we'll be like, well, I don't know. We're going to have to wait and see. So, we do go through that, and a lot does change, and the twists and the turns change along the way. But so far, we always do know that major twist. And that for us, that's how we want to start. And it takes a while to come up with it. We brainstorm for a long time. And then when we come up with something that we're super excited about, and we think, yes, that's the story, everything grows from that.
I just want to jump in here to say that sometimes for me, like I have an idea of a twist or a surprise or something's going to happen, and then it goes in another direction, and there's this major twist that happens that grows out of the action that I never could have predicted or anticipated.
Yeah.
And then I think, but was that there all along somehow subconsciously, because it all melds, it all works together, and I don't have to go back and change the beginning. So maybe it's that mystical subconscious.
I
think our subconscious definitely has it. Yeah, I think it does. I mean, there's oftentimes, I don't know, like I'm trying to remember one of the books, I think it was Wife Stalker, where in one chapter where she's got a stain, she's a stepmother, and the kids spill something on her favorite. She's trying to get the spot out. And then in the next chapter, which had been written first, because it's not always in order, or it was written after it, but independent of each other. And one of us compared her to Lady Macbeth. And we didn't even realize till later that like the spot, I mean, so all of those things.
I love that. And your readers are thinking, oh, they're so smart. They're so literary. And you're like, yeah, sure. It was a coincidence or something like that. I was reading something where someone said, the muse will come if you're working.
Yes.
And I wonder if that is right. Wendy, what do you think about that? Plot, fear factor, or character?
It depends on the book. Just like you, I oftentimes start with a plot or a twist, like Lynn. With American Girl, it started with a character. It was just this character. I had to write this girl, but it wasn't just this girl. It was what was going on in her life, and so the plot grew out of that. And it just really depends. In Don't Look for Me, it started with this moment that I had at this gas station in this small town. And I thought, what if I actually had walked down that road and my life was so terrible, I didn't want to walk away. And then I write thrillers. So I had to come up with a thriller plot. If I was writing, a romance novel, maybe she would have met a handsome innkeeper and had a wonderful.
I love that. Well, that's one of the questions that we
from that moment,
That's one of the questions that we have, and let you keep talking about that. Is what brought you to thrillers? I know American Girl is this fabulous #1 audio. We'll talk a little bit about that, which is just a wild success. But why did you all decide to write this genre? Wendy, go ahead, because I want you to talk
Oh,
about
yeah,
American
of
Girl.
course. So I started out writing women's fiction. Actually, my first novel that was never published was a legal thriller because I was a lawyer and I loved legal thrillers. And then I started writing just general fiction because I had a story I was interested in. And it was really after I was practicing law and got involved with psychology and also wanting to write something that I had the skills for and that my agent thought was marketable. I mean, I'm just going to be honest. And I had been writing for many years. I don't know how many years at that point, maybe 15 years or something. And I said, okay, this isn't working. So what genre is working that I have the skills to write? And it was a perfect sort of, coming together of a skill set, maybe a twisted mind and a genre that was selling and good advice from my agent. And I love it. I feel like I should have been writing this all along. And but American Girl, what's so interesting about that book is that it is a little bit lighter. It's not it's not as twisty and psychologically dark as my other books because it's a 17-year-old girl and she's autistic and it's very character driven and she's it has a different feel to it, but it's people seem to be loving it, which I'm so grateful for. And we went to audio first because it felt like the right place to start with that story. So it's interesting, even within the genre, there is a lot of I feel like there's a lot of breadth, right? There's a lot of
and I wonder if you had not written all that you had written before, whether you would so easily, and I don't mean to be easily, but whether you would have so gracefully found your love of thriller writing. You trained yourself to write a book. Lynn, I know you and your sister wrote things before you turned to thrillers as well. What was it that brought you to thrillers?
I always loved reading thrillers, and I write also, as you know, under Elsie Shaw, a much more traditional thrillers, which I had, always been drawn to. And then for Valerie and me, it was really the story. So we didn't choose necessarily psychological thrillers. We wrote The Last Mrs. Parrish because it was a story we wanted to tell. And our agent, we thought it was just regular fiction. And it's interesting. It's like when for Apple, they characterize it as just general fiction. It's not even characterized as a thriller on Apple books, even though on Amazon it is. And she said, this is a psychological thriller. It crosses both. I mean, I don't even know if women's fiction is still a thing anymore, but whatever, it was called women's fiction at the time. And so we wrote that. And then it was like, obviously it was very successful. And so, okay, well, what's your next psychological thriller? So then we just kept going, we kept going with it. But I mean, it is a genre that I love. I don't, that there really isn't any other genre that I think I would really be drawn to, other than, again, I like the more traditional thriller. I mean, who knows what the future will hold, but we like reading it. We like writing those. And so it just is a natural fit.
I mean, who knows what the future will hold? Could any time be more the time to say something like that?
Yes.
And I know, Debbie, you were talking about working on your next book. Is it a psychological dark thriller as well?
It also is. Yes, it is. And it's also a legal thriller. And I also wanted to say that I grew up reading mysteries and thrillers and psychological suspense. My mother did too. Maybe it's inherited. I always like to be surprised, as my husband Ted says. I love to guess the killer. And what's interesting, I always like mysteries. And whodunits. But what's interesting and different about Saving Grace is that it's a hybrid. It's psychological suspense, a whodunit, but it's also a mystery, a whodunit. So that's unusual. I got to put both genres that I love together. And the new book, yes, that is also dark, a real psychological thriller. And it's also a legal thriller because it's about a female Manhattan Supreme Court judge.
Wonderful.
Totally
and what's it called? Tell us what it's called.
Victim.
And we will put links to the bookstore in the chat so you can get all of these books right as this program is continuing. If you haven't read them all, I highly, highly, highly recommend them. We're running out of time and we have a couple of really amazing questions here. Michael Goldfader is saying, from my daughter, I'm a sophomore in high school with an interest in creative writing. what path do you recommend to break into the industry, college, and otherwise? I think you can see from all of us here how different a path it is. What one thing do you think people would need if they want to be an author? What is one
I would say perseverance is the
That's what I
biggest
was going to
thing.
say.
Yes.
Keep writing, send your work out. You know the stories you hear about 100 rejections, how 1 in 6,000 people now gets an agent, I just read recently. Keep writing, never give up, keep sending your work out, and it's going to happen because you have a gift and you have the ambition and it's inside you. What else can you do?
I mean, did you ever want to, I mean, are you in love with this, Wendy? And are you glad of the path that you took?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's the best job in the world, and I feel that it's just a gift. I feel that it's a gift every day that I can do this as my job and spend my time thinking about characters and plots and psychology is a gift. So,
but Michael's daughter, and I want her to know from all of us too that, you know, we're all happy and we're all happy with our writing lives, but writing is very difficult.
Yes.
Don't you think? And the process is very difficult, and the publishing world is very difficult. Lynn, what would you say about just one step at a time and that kind of thing? That it's not an easy task.
It's not. I mean, I think always improving your craft is hugely important, and you have to be careful about, you know, all writing courses are not created equal. All mentors are not created equal. So you have to be selective, and it's hard to know. But I mean, I think it doesn't hurt, again, to take, you know, the creative writing classes. I don't think you have to go necessarily and get an MFA, although if that's what somebody wants to do, obviously that's fine. For me, I found a terrific writing mentor here in Westport, Connecticut at the time, you know, did small craft, and I learned so much from him. And a lot of reading of craft books, reading other books, reading classics, reading, you know, in your genre of what you want, and writing. I mean, it's just, what do they say? You need 10,000 hours in anything before you start, right? To perfect your craft. So you just have to keep doing it and know it can, I mean, very few people write that first book and get represented. So it can take several books, but you just write the next and the next and the next until you get that deal.
I mean, I hope Michael listens to all of us. Michael's daughter listens to all of us about our different paths and how, you know, Wendy wasn't able to be a brilliant ice skater from moment one, and Debbie wasn't a great actor from moment one. It's all a path. We have time for one more question, and we have two, so I'm going to let you two choose. Do you want to talk about evil or fun?
Or what?
Evil or fun?
Oh, obviously evil. Come on.
So Joanne wants to know what's the fun part of writing a thriller, and you see it all here. It is fun. But Evans Babbitt wants to know, is evil absolute or according to one's perspective, and doesn't exist on a slippery slope of daily circumstances where one thing can lead to another without a real plan in mind? I think Evans has an idea.
That's a pretty,
what do you think about that anyway?
I mean, I think there's absolute evil. I don't think everything, I think that there are people that maybe are not evil who do evil things, but I do think that there's evil. I mean, I think there's evidence of that in the news and things that you hear, and horrible, I mean, awful things that happen. I don't know, you know, what the cause of it is, but I do think there is right and wrong. You know, I mean, there are certain things that maybe can be on a spectrum, but I definitely think.
And sometimes it's incremental. People make a decision that they didn't know they were going to make, and then they find themselves, like Wendy's book, in a place and then in a different place and then in a different place, and you wind up doing something you never thought you would do.
I mean, it depends. For psychological thrillers, it is definitely, we have characters who are driven by trauma and they do things they don't intend. But in, like, my book, The Network, Damon Cross, he's evil. There's no way around it. I mean, that is who he is. So, and he makes no apologies for it.
And on that note, that evil note, which is the perfect way to end tonight's event, let me recommend to all of you yet again Debbie Babbitt's wonderful Saving Grace, and Lynn and Valerie Constantine's The Stranger in the Mirror, and Wendy Walker's Don't Look for Me. All
And Hank's, picture, hold your please. Yes.
Oh, I will hold up my, I just happen to
Yes,
have
Her
it.
Perfect Life, which is,
Perfect Life.
I have read and is amazing, and Hank is fabulous. So you definitely want to check Hank's
Thank
book
you.
out.
That's so sweet of you all.
That's
Thank you.
very true.
I am so grateful that all of you three came tonight, and so grateful that all of you came tonight to be in our audience, even if you wouldn't play the quiz. It's all a good sport, and we wish you safety. Remember, as I always say, it's always safe inside a book. So I hope you will look for these tonight. And thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you, Hank. Thank you.
This was great, everyone.
And
Terrific.
the Darien Library would love to thank you for spending an evening with us. And now we have 4 more evenings filled with thrillers for the rest of the week. But you're all terrific and your books are great. And we can't thank you enough for coming and spending some time with us.
Oh, thank you for having us.
Yeah, thanks, Hank, for moderating.
Oh, my pleasure, of course.
All right.
Wonderful.
So we'll see you all next week for some other events. And in the meantime, pick up these books and get scared.
Hey.
Bye, everybody.
Good night, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.